The strange thing wasn't that Ethan lied. The strange thing was that nobody seemed to care when he told the truth. 6 months later, he stood alone in a wedding venue bathroom, staring at himself in a mirror framed by expensive gold lights. Outside, nearly 200 guests laughed, drank champagne, and celebrated a life they believed belonged to him. Inside, Ethan felt sick. Because in less than 10 minutes, he was going to walk back into that room and tell everyone something he should have admitted months ago. Maybe years ago. The strange part? The truth wasn't what scared him. It was what the truth might reveal about everyone else, including himself. 6 months earlier, nobody noticed Ethan Parker, and that wasn't self-pity. It was simply a fact. At 29, Ethan worked as an administrative assistant for a luxury real estate company in Manhattan. He wasn't the guy selling penthouses. He wasn't the guy negotiating million-dollar deals. He was the guy scheduling meetings for people who negotiated million-dollar deals. The invisible guy. The guy successful people accidentally walked past. The guy who carried coffee into conference rooms where people discussed buying apartments worth more than everything he'd earn in his lifetime. His apartment sat above a Chinese takeout restaurant in Queens. The walls were thin, the pipes rattled. His refrigerator made noises that sounded vaguely threatening. Every month, his checking account performed the same depressing magic trick. Money entered, then disappeared. Meanwhile, the internet seemed determined to remind him that everyone else was winning. Private jets, luxury vacations, perfect relationships, perfect bodies, perfect lives. Every scroll felt like a guided tour through other people's success. And somewhere deep down, Ethan carried a suspicion he never spoke aloud. Maybe people only mattered after they became impressive. One Thursday evening, Ethan's boss asked him for a favor. A wealthy client had left his Ferrari in the company garage. The client was overseas. The vehicle needed to be moved. Ethan received the keys. Nothing dramatic. 5 minutes. That's all. As he climbed into the driver's seat, a co-worker named Trevor laughed. "Dude," Trevor pulled out his phone. "You finally made it." Snap. One photograph. Ethan sitting behind the wheel. Trevor sent it to him. That night, Ethan posted it. No caption, no explanation, just a photograph. And that should have been the end of it. The next morning felt strange. His phone wouldn't stop vibrating. Likes, comments, messages, hundreds of them. Old classmates suddenly reappeared. People who hadn't spoken to him in years. Former coworkers, distant relatives, even a girl he'd had a crush on in college. For the first time in his life, Ethan's notifications felt alive. At lunch, his coworker Melissa sat beside him. Melissa rarely spoke to him. Now she smiled. "You never told us you were doing so well." Ethan frowned. "What do you mean?" She nodded toward his phone. "The Ferrari." Ethan laughed. "It wasn't mine." "Oh." She smiled politely. Conversation over. She returned to her table. That should have been the end of that. Except Ethan noticed something. The warmth disappeared the moment the illusion did. Like a switch. And for reasons he couldn't explain, that bothered him. A lot. Over the following weeks, Ethan conducted an experiment. Not consciously at first, then very consciously. Whenever people made assumptions, he stopped correcting them. That was all. Nothing more. If someone thought he owned the Ferrari, if someone assumed he invested in real estate, he smiled. If someone believed he spent weekends networking with wealthy entrepreneurs, he never disagreed. And slowly, something remarkable happened. The world became friendlier. People listened longer, laughed harder, responded faster. Invitations appeared. Opportunities appeared. Respect appeared. It was like discovering a hidden doorway inside society. One that had apparently been there the entire time. The funny part? The lies weren't even impressive. Most existed entirely inside other people's imaginations. People created stories, then believed them. Ethan simply stopped interrupting. One evening, he attended a rooftop networking event. Months earlier, nobody would have noticed him. Now strangers introduced themselves. One man spent 20 minutes asking Ethan for business advice. Business advice? Ethan almost laughed. His greatest financial achievement was remembering to pay his electric bill on time. Yet there they sat, listening, nodding, respecting him. The entire thing felt absurd and strangely addictive. Then came Olivia. Not because she was beautiful, though she was, not because she was wealthy, though she probably was. Olivia was dangerous because she seemed immune to status. The first time they met, she asked him a question nobody else had asked. "What do you actually do?" Ethan hesitated, then answered honestly, "I'm an assistant." Olivia smiled. "That sounds exhausting. No judgment, no disappointment, just curiosity." It unsettled him. For months he'd been surrounded by people obsessed with appearances. Olivia seemed interested in reality, the real thing. And Ethan discovered something unfortunate. Reality felt good. They began seeing each other regularly. Bookstores, coffee shops, long walks through the city. Simple things, the kind of things Ethan genuinely enjoyed. Yet every time he thought about telling her everything, fear stopped him. Because now the lie had become larger than wealth. The lie had become identity. Who was he without the version people admired? Who was he without the attention? Without the respect? Without the validation? The question haunted him. Because he wasn't entirely sure anymore. Then something happened that should have made him happy. His company promoted him. A real promotion. A legitimate one. The kind he had worked years to earn. When his boss announced it, everyone congratulated him. Yet instead of pride, Ethan felt doubt. Had he earned it? Or had perception earned it for him? That question followed him home, followed him into bed, followed him everywhere. Because once you notice people treating you differently, you start wondering which version of yourself they're responding to. Months passed. Followers grew, connections grew, opportunities multiplied. And still, Ethan couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. Not externally, internally. The fake version of himself kept winning. The real version kept disappearing. One night, Olivia noticed. They sat together overlooking the East River. The city shimmered in the darkness. "You seem tired." Ethan smiled weakly. "I'm fine." "No." Olivia looked at him carefully. "You seem lonely." The comment landed harder than he expected, because loneliness had never disappeared. Success had merely decorated it. Then came the engagement. And that's when everything began collapsing, not dramatically, quietly, like a crack spreading through glass. The wedding planner asked innocent questions: budgets, investments, property, future plans, questions built on assumptions, assumptions built on appearances. And every answer pushed Ethan further into a version of himself he no longer recognized. That night he barely slept. By morning he understood something terrifying. If he married Olivia without telling the truth, the lie would become permanent. Not online, in real life. Which is how he ended up standing in a wedding venue bathroom 6 months after posting a photograph that wasn't technically a lie. The room outside buzzed with laughter. Family, friends, co-workers, followers, people who believed they knew him. The door opened. Olivia stepped inside. She looked beautiful, but that wasn't what struck him. It was the calmness in her eyes, like she already knew. Maybe she did. "You're thinking about running." Ethan laughed softly. "Is it that obvious?" "A little." Silence settled between them. Then Ethan looked at her, really looked at her, and finally asked the question he'd been avoiding for months. What if nobody likes the real me? Olivia stared at him for a long moment, then smiled sadly. "Ethan." She stepped closer. "The real you is the only person I've ever known." The words hit harder than any accusation could have. Because suddenly he saw it. The followers, the networking events, the admiration, the performance, most of it had existed inside his own fear. The people who truly mattered had never been asking for perfection, only honesty. The wedding went ahead, not because Ethan kept pretending, because he stopped. That afternoon, before the ceremony, he told the truth. To everyone, the Ferrari, the assumptions, the social media image. Everything. Some people looked uncomfortable. Some laughed. Some seemed disappointed. A few quietly left. And perhaps that was the most revealing part. The people who disappeared had never been there for Ethan, only for the story. Years later, Ethan would remember something strange about that day. Not the embarrassment, not the confession, not even the relief. He remembered watching people react, because some of them genuinely seemed upset. Not because he'd lied, because reality had interrupted a fantasy they enjoyed believing, and that realization stayed with him. People often claim they want authenticity, but what they frequently reward is performance. The world doesn't always fall in love with truth. Sometimes it falls in love with the stories we fake. And sometimes we do too. The hardest lie Ethan ever told wasn't convincing strangers he was successful. It was convincing himself that success was the reason he deserved to be loved. Once he stopped believing that, something remarkable happened. For the first time in years, he no longer felt invisible, because he finally realized that the people worth keeping were never impressed by the performance. They were waiting for the person hiding behind it.